Greetings, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are broadcasting live from Park City, Utah, and to the deep parts of Australia. So thanks for getting up early, guys. Again, you're really
dark parts.
Yeah. So thank you again for being with us today. We're delighted to have Darren and crew back to talk about the Whiskey Project. Super exciting, especially in terms of what's going on in current events in the Red Sea and so forth. And I think you'll see that connection here shortly. We know you're there. We can't hear or see you in terms of chatting live, but we are welcome all your questions through the chat and the Q&A, and we'd ask that you post them as they come to mind so we can get as many as possible in today. The big thank you to our friends who brought us to this project, and Chris Davino and company. And so we're really excited for having the group back today and talk about something that's in many ways interesting to all of us, especially those that are in the US, for example, having to do with national security. And I know many of you are keen in that sort of thing. So we're going to be producing a recording of this. So if you care to revisit it or have others that you know in your network after you're hearing today is interesting to them, you're welcome to share it, and we'll make sure that everybody gets in touch with the group post-webinar as well. So with that, if you want to, Darren, open it up and do quick introductions all the way around, then we'll get into the meat of the matter. Welcome. Thank you for being here, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. Darren Schuback, I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Whiskey Project Group. Thanks everyone for their time today. I know we've all got busy lives these days. I'll just quickly introduce everyone, and then we'll go around the room. So with me today in the headquarters in Sydney, I have Robert Bakewell, who's our Chief Financial Officer. Robert, you want to just...
Yep. Hello, everybody. As Darren said, my name is Robert Bakewell. I joined the Whiskey Project Group about 12 months ago. Up until then, my career has been as a CFO of a couple of major entities listed on the Australian Stock Exchange in specifically the manufacturing sphere. And I've got quite a bit of experience in US acquisitions and businesses in the US, including the fourth largest brick manufacturer in the US, anyone who's building a house at the moment. So thanks for joining this morning.
Thanks, Robert. And with us on your screen there, I have Paul Billingham, who's our chairman. Paul?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Paul Billingham, chairman of the group, and I've been with the firm for almost 3 years now. My background is accounting, former national managing partner of Grant Thornton here in Australia, in the advisory space, and now sit on a number of boards, either as director or chair, of which whiskey is by far the most exciting and the most promising. So good to be with you today.
Thanks, Paul. And with him, we have George Stavrow, who's our corporate advisor. George?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I've been working with the team for a couple of years now in relation to their strategic initiatives and capital raising requirements.
Thanks, George. And Paul Kennedy, we have with us this morning, who's our US-based strategic advisor. Paul?
Hello, folks. Paul Kennedy, retired Marine Major General, career infantry officer, and unfortunate refugee from several functions within Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Paul.
Nice.
Without further ado, I'll just go straight into the presentation here. As I said, thank you for your time. The Whiskey Project Group, why we exist. Our mission statement is we're aspiring to be the globally preferred and trusted provider of innovative watercraft solutions in order to continuously serve government, commercial and rescue agencies' evolutionary needs. That's quite a mouthful there. But by way of my background, I served 25 years in the Navy as a frogman in multiple theatres around the world. Spent a lot of my time working in special operations, have been exposed to a number of different watercraft, including all of their shortfalls, and left the Navy in 2019, founded the business and decided to build the watercraft that we wish we had, fixing a lot of performance and operational issues that I had faced throughout my 25-year career. Why we're here today, we're looking to raise it up to $20 million to assist in our growth, particularly focused in our US-based growth, to support further US Department of Defense contracts and delivery of our whisky watercraft, both the Whiskey Alpha and Whiskey Bravo watercraft, which you just got a glimpse of, but I'll go into further details associated with that throughout the presentation. We have initially secured a contract through the US Department of Defense Defense Innovation Unit pathway to deliver initially eight whiskey vessels, which we're in the process of doing so. In fact, we're the first to have just landed over in California in the port of Los Angeles, and we're in the process, the team's over there in the process of delivering them down to the Marine base at Camp Pendleton in Southern California over the next couple of days. So exciting times for the company as we continue to deliver on what we've set out to do. There are significant other opportunities, not only in Australia, but around the globe, particularly through a foreign military sales process, and other countries that have directly reached out to us. Importantly, the success in the US has been a critical point of validation. It's evidence of the fact that we are now a trusted and proven provider to defence, not only the US, but Australia as well. We've competed globally against 35 other vendors in this process to be contracted with the US government. And who would have thought that a couple of former operators knew what they were talking about when we set out to build the craft that we wish we had. We do have, the company here in Australia and New Zealand is extremely strong. In fact, we've got an order book full for the next 2 to 3 years, and we can continue to grow domestically to service state and federal government agencies. The group, when I talk about the Whiskey Project Group, we are a group of companies. It's not just the Whiskey Project. It's not just the Whiskey Alpha and the Bravo, the specialist military watercraft, although they're the primary focus of today. We do own a number of other brands. In the middle there, you can see Naiad, the four-wheel drive of the sea. We own Naiad. It's a globally recognized and trusted brand that we're continuing to expand throughout Europe, and then in the fullness of time back into the US market. We do have our own manufacturing facility located in Australia, and we have a number of subcontracted manufacturing arrangements both here and in the process of solidifying some in the US as well. We do have our architectural design house, which is also located in New Zealand, supporting the broader group. Our strategic focus primarily is the United States Marine Corps. The US Marine Corps have gone through an extensive transition and focus under the previous Commandant of the Marine Corps who initiated it, General Berger. He initiated a transition from focusing on fighting wars in the deserts and mountains of the Middle East back into the maritime domain. And I'll get Paul Kennedy to talk more to that in a moment, but that's where our primary focus is. We are a very key element to supporting that transition, particularly in the small craft, in the combatant craft space, to support the US Marine Corps' transition. Like the Marine Corps, there's a number of other defence forces around the world that are in the similar process of transitioning from fighting wars on land to being more agile and maritime focused. The Australian Defence Force in particular, but like I said, there's a number of other pressures on various regions around the world with the refugee crisis in Northern Africa. We've got the European nations trying to secure their maritime borders. We've got the pressure of Russia up further to the east and north, putting pressure on a number of other European nations. So they're scrambling to try and secure their borders as well. And then, as we all know, the pressure that China's placing around the Indo-Pacific region and further east as well. We have manufacturing for the whisky vessels. We have manufacturing for the military vessels. So we've got a headquarters here in Sydney. We're in the process of transitioning manufacturing across to the US, particularly in around the Norfolk, Virginia region. We're also in the process of standing up subcontractor agreements for manufacturing down in Mississippi and also in Rhode Island as well, further to the north, where they have a very much a focus on composite, carbon fibre composite manufacturing. As you all know, Rhode Island's got a huge pedigree of that with the America's Cup campaign operating out of there. Our commercial and rescue focus there. So we're already, as an organisation, we continue to supply particularly our NIAD watercraft to both state and federal government agencies. There's a number of key clients there on your screen, and that continues to grow over the years as well. Leisure market, we're not primarily focused on the leisure market, but due to the trust in our products, we quite often get leisure clients come to us requesting a leisure boat, there's an example of one there. That's a 50-foot NIAD leisure boat that we recently delivered to a high net worth individual here in Australia who wanted to drive that vessel around Australia. In fact, he's on his way down south towards Tasmania, for those of you who know where that is. But our primary focus here has been our market penetration into the US. We've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years having conducting a very focused campaign into the United States Marine Corps, knowing that they were going through that transition back into the maritime domain. Paul Kennedy, if I could just ask you to turn your video on and just give us some broader background, please, on the United States Marine Corps and what they're aiming to do in the small craft space, please. You're on mute.
Yep, sorry. Hello, folks. Paul Kennedy. As I introduced myself, I'm a career infantry officer back in the late 80s, and starting in 1990, the Marine Corps had a small craft company located down in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and we maintained that capability for about 15 years. The United States Navy took over that mission during the War on Terror. Marines were otherwise engaged in land operations, so the Navy stood up what was called a riverine force. That capability has now not been mothballed, but it's been sort of de-emphasized as the Navy is focused on blue water fights against peer competitors like China. And so it's left a gap. In my last operational command, I was in charge of all the Marines west of California, about 20,000 Marines in Okinawa, Japan. And we had a problem with mobility within the islands, what we call the first island chain, which extends from Japan down to the Philippines. You could even extend it to Indonesia, Vietnam, what have you. We have no means of getting Marines or special forces into tactical locations that influence the Chinese Navy. This has been an outstanding requirement for several years. 2 years ago, 4 3-star generals in the Marine Corps signed a joint letter that stated the requirement for about 130 watercraft. And these were specifically designated. They had specific design functions. And the Whiskey Project stepped up and built a boat that not only met that requirement, but far exceeded what the Marine Corps had ever envisioned. When it was offered to industry for a competitive bid, not only did the Whiskey Project Group provide their boat, which blew everybody out of the water, no pun intended, the other entrants did not even have a prototype boat. They just took a 30-year-old hull form, dusted it off, and told the Marines that this is what we would do if we were to offer you a boat. And so there is no other alternative today on the water other than the Whiskey boats, the Alpha and the Bravo boat. So Darren has done something that nobody could imagine, that a foreign builder could exceed the requirement of defense and delivered on time. And so the first 2 boats are being delivered to the 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California. It will undergo their sea trials, and then it will be the leading edge of subsequent buys to exceed eventually what I believe is about 130 boats. And I apologize if I'm repeating. And so this is going to be the leading edge of what Darren has described as a robust U.S. market. We've already seen U.S. Special Forces evidence interest in this boat. The Green Berets would like to use this boat because it is a purpose-built reconnaissance boat. Outside of defense, it could go to the U.S. Coast Guard. It could go to U.S. law enforcement. Once the Marine Corps puts its stamp of approval on this boat, this market is almost unlimited in the amount of people that will want to copy what my Marines have done. And so, Darren, I'm not sure if that's too windy, but this is a great opportunity for U.S. defense to reacquire a capability that it had lost and to have it purposely focused on Southwest Asia. I'm sorry, Southeast Asia. And we don't even have to describe who the enemy is out there. But I'm telling you right now, this is going to scare the bejesus out of our enemies.
Thanks, Paul.
So Darren, Paul, even for those of us that are not familiar with the procurement process for the Department of Defense in the U.S., that would seemingly be a daunting task, that you've crossed a milestone that is extraordinary. Am I overstating this? I mean, it just seems like
no, Arthur.
Yeah.
In fact, it's an understatement. So I described I was unfortunate to have refugee status of several functions in Washington, D.C., one of which was working with Congress for several years. And Congress is all about programs, and programs are all about money. And it's how quickly can you go from a concept or a requirement and a concept to an actual fielded program. And typically the lead time is several years, 5, 6, in some cases 10 years. If you look at an airplane, it can be 20 years before it's actually fielded. In this case, Darren and his team very presciently looked at what the Marine Corps' requirement is, exceeded what that requirement would be, built a boat with an open architecture, so it makes it, indefinitely upgradable, so to speak, and presented it in the amount of time it typically takes just to build a slide deck in the DoD world. And so I've never seen a program go from DoD or the Marine Corps in this case puts out a requirement to somebody actually fielding a solution, and because of the Defense Innovation Unit, the funding was acquired and the boat is now being purchased. I've never seen anything go that fast in my life, or in my career rather.
Yeah, and in this case, it's just fortuitous that as we speak, that boat is in the U.S. on its way to be tested. Like, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, that's correct. So we're delivering the first 2 Whiskey Bravo, which are the larger craft, which I'll go into over the next couple of slides. We're delivering those this coming week. They're getting delivered down to Camp Pendleton in Southern California there in preparation to be handed over to the Marines over the next couple of weeks. whilst we're also conducting training, NAVC certification, all the rest of those components that go with delivering a watercraft. We get a lot of questions around why Whiskey watercraft and not others. I know Paul's just touched on a number of elements associated with these watercraft, and what makes these craft unique compared to any other craft that are in service. Why can't we do this? You know, why wouldn't they just go to a US-based boat builder and just say, well, build us a boat? So what we've essentially done here is, taken all of my 25 years of operational experience, my colleagues, we've got a number of veterans working within the organisation. We've taken all of their experience and started to develop these craft to fix all of these problems that not only the Australians were facing, it turns out the whole world was facing, as far as, the operators are concerned. The whole world of operators are facing these same problems in watercraft. What we historically saw were boats being delivered that were built and designed by boat builders and no fault of their own. They just don't have the operational experience when it comes to the combat environment in utilising these craft and deploying these craft all around the world. So we've taken all this experience and we've started to work with cutting edge architects, engineers, and I'm talking about cutting edge, our lead architect on the development of these craft is currently the US America's Cup American Magic. He's the head architect for the American Magic campaign at the moment. In fact, he's over in Spain leading that at the moment. So this is the pedigree of personnel that I've brought in to develop the Whiskey line of watercraft to help us overcome these issues that we were facing. So we mapped out all of the issues initially, and then we started to design and develop. And I rarely take no for an answer for those of you who know me. So when it comes to innovation, we've managed to design and develop these craft where we've fixed a whole number of performance and safety issues, whilst also offering the operator an absolutely purpose-built, fit-for-purpose craft that they can utilize, ergonomically utilize in the combat environment. And to Paul's point before, that meets the contemporary needs of the operator too. It's not a dumb boat anymore. Like, these craft can push and pull data anywhere around the world. You can be sitting in an island chain, in Southeast Asia, and someone can be sitting in the Pentagon looking at exactly what the Whiskey Bravo or Whiskey Alpha is looking at to make real-time command and control decisions, or to help the commanders on the spot make real-time command and control decisions anywhere around the world. It could host a number of systems, contemporary warfare systems, such as unmanned surface vessels. So these craft can be optionally uncrewed or autonomous as well. So they've got all the infrastructure to support autonomy. We've tested and proven that. In fact, we'll be responding to a recently released DIU, US Navy unmanned surface vessel request for information. I'll be doing that over the next couple of weeks, as there's already been talk about this hull being able to be the future for the unmanned surface vessel problem over in the US as well. It can host systems, any type of weapon systems, up to and including missile systems. We recently hosted twin quad canister Raphael surface-to-surface missile systems on the back of this, on our Whiskey Bravo craft, as recently as November last year. This year, we're working towards a live firing of two missile systems off the back of the Whiskey Bravo craft, working with the United States Department of Defense over the coming months as well. Can't go into the details of that, but this is the level of kinetic impact that these craft can deliver. So no longer are we committing or having to commit a patrol boat or a frigate or a destroyer in strategic choke points. We've got the ability now to grab a Whiskey Bravo craft, put it out there, uncrewed, can conduct intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, but it can also deliver a kinetic effect if required. So we're not putting our sailors and Marines in harm's way anymore. I mean, it's not costing us $1 billion to put, a frigate or a destroyer out there. So now we've got a low-cost solution that can deliver an effect that has never been seen before. So, and as far as, why whisky as well and why the Marine Corps went down this path, we've essentially saved them 3 to 4 years of development in the craft when they've got a time now need for maritime combatant craft capability. So they looked at us and said, oh my goodness, you have solved all of our problems, this is why we want, this type of craft. This is why we want the Whiskey Alpha. This is why we want the Whiskey Bravo. We've essentially saved them 3 years of development and testing and evaluation of these craft. So we've spoken about the Marine Corps. We're currently delivering 8 vessels, so 4 Whiskey Bravos, which are our larger craft, and 4 of the Whiskey Alpha craft. We're in the process of delivering those first 2 Bravos. And as Paul alluded to, the General alluded to there, I'm anticipating, we're already talking about how this transitioning into a much larger campaign over the coming years as well. In fact, I'll be leaving this Sunday back to the US for a month or so to start solidifying the follow-on orders associated with this initial delivery of these craft. So the Whiskey Bravo craft, it's a 40 foot craft. It's designed, and we've carefully designed these craft as well around about matching, I guess, the infantry payloads, the infantry deployment sizes within the United States Marine Corps. So these are very much matched for those of you with any military background. They're very much matched towards a patrol, a platoon, etc., etc. And they're all carbon fibre composite craft, giving us a significant payload advantage. And the opportunity, as Paul alluded to there, they've got an immediate need for around 130 craft, but then there's the foreign military sales associated with that, and then there's the replacement life cycle associated with the Marine Corps as well. So I'm anticipating over the next 10 years, based on some, and this is conservatively, we're looking anywhere between 450 to 550 whiskey type watercraft to be delivered over the next 10 years. Just associated, with that waterfall effect associated with the Marine Corps adopting these craft initially, because we're already in conversations with the United States Army, SOCOM, the Air Force, believe it or not, they operate boats. There's the foreign military sales into Central and South America. They've got some significant programs to replace all of their craft over the next 5 years, and they're looking at when you look at Central and South America, their main transportation corridors all reside around rivers. So they've got programs of 200, 300, 400 vessel requirements. So we're already in conversations with them as well. I guess that's why we're here today, because we're transitioning to the US to, on this growth trajectory to be able to deliver on these programs that we're currently targeting. This slide here is just to highlight that the relationship that we have with our own government, we're well supported by the Australian government. We've conducted an extensive government relations campaign both here in Australia and in the US. We're not naive when it comes to the for the need and the power of engaging on Capitol Hill in the US. And Paul and others have been helping us navigate through that over the past few years to seek congressional support. And I guess here's some recent photos of us being in Washington, being with the Australian ambassador to the United States, and having very intimate support from the Australian Embassy in Washington to engage with broader Washington and congressmen and women and senators. This is probably more photos about me, so I apologise for that. That's just myself with the Australian Prime Minister in Washington once again for his recent visit with the President of the United States.
Darren, can we talk a second about, since you brought up the proposed amount of vessels that are going to be needed, not just in the US, but otherwise, what's the, what if anything that keeps you up at night about competition, like reverse engineering, some boat builder that's been, embedded in the military in the US, for example, up to this point? What's the likelihood that they might want to spread this around and somebody could build this similar and get part of the deal flow, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question, Arthur. So there'll always be competitors. There'll always be copycats as well. We've learned that since we established the business in 2019. We can already look around the world and see our competitors starting to copy what we're doing. But what we have also noticed is they don't have the intimate knowledge that we have around, or the operational knowledge that we have around why these watercraft have been developed in such a way that they have been developed. They'll go and put you'll see on the craft there that we've got a cutaway in the, around the halfway down the side of the boat. They'll go put a cutaway in their boat and think, oh, yep, that's what we need. They don't have the intimate understanding associated with why we put the cutaway there. So, and we continue to develop. I just briefed recently at our AGM, I just briefed our current shareholder base around innovation and why it's important to the Whisky Project Group. I'm already working on, so what we're delivering here is the current Whisky Alpha and Bravo. I'm already working on the next generation of Whisky watercraft, which will be revealed later this year, which will provide a significant capability advantage to the end user and the operators. That's already in train. That's happening in the background. It's not public. We're not sharing that information. But while our competitors are trying to catch up and copy what we've already done, I'm already working on the next generation of Whisky watercraft, which once it's revealed later this year, it'll continue to blow people's minds away with, oh my God, this is where Whisky's going next. But this is all the innovation within the Whisky Project is based on not today's operational needs, but we're engaged with our colleagues that are still in uniform, both in Australia, both in the US, in the UK, etc. We're constantly talking to them about what are their future needs. And we've got conversations into Special Operations Command who are on the cutting edge of, trying to overcome their challenges in the maritime domain. So we're looking at these problems, helping them solve these problems. So we're taking that and we're applying it to our innovation processes and thinking about, okay, well, what do we need these craft to do to help the operators overcome their challenges that they're facing now, but they'll be facing in 5 years' time. And it's a constant innovation cycle to stay ahead. You'll never stop competitors, and that's part of business, but what we can do is continually innovate.
I think just adding to that, Darren, one of the great things, Arthur, has been over the last 2 years, it's effectively been a co-development with the DIU. The way they've supported us in terms of expressing their needs, working alongside in development, and then indeed the contract that they've provided to us to date is incredibly supportive, both in terms of its financial aspects, but also the timing. They've been very nurturing, which, considering the company was relatively new, has been really reassuring that they really have chosen Whisky and are backing it to the hilt. Yes, we have 34 other companies that we beat are going to sit there and do nothing. But the fact is that we have, it's not just the inside running on this. We have the advantage. We have the customer. It's now a question of us scaling up as quick as we can, which is a lot of what this capital raise is all about, is ensuring that now we've won, that we really do lock in that advantage. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Paul. Arthur, I hope that answers your question enough.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
So we're looking at what's next. There's a number of opportunities both across Australia, the US, etc. So from a business development, perspective, there's opportunity for the Whisky Project Group to grow exponentially over the next 5 years. What we're primarily focused on is achieving the capital raise so that we can continue to grow as we have over the past few years and help us expand into the US. We need to establish full-scale manufacturing in the US so that we can better support the opportunities that are being presented to us in the US, hence why we're here today. There is a significant tail associated with what we're doing as well. So not only are we delivering these crafts, we're manufacturing and delivering these crafts, but the tail associated with service maintenance, through life maintenance of these craft, traditionally has been 2 times the value of the initial sale of the craft. So there's a significant opportunity associated with that through life maintenance, service and support over the next 10 years. We're also expanding and exploring further opportunities in Europe. We're not trying to do too much too soon here. We're very balanced in our approach here. But what we've found particularly over the past 18 to 24 months, is a lot of European nations have approached us through our US campaign, off the back of our US campaign, off the back of what we're doing here in Australia. We've had a number of 21 different European countries approach us saying, how can we get hold of these whisky watercraft? So we're not rushing over to Europe whilst also rushing over the US. US is very much our focused effort, but we're certainly transitioning the business in such a way that we can service not only the US market, but also from an export and foreign military sales perspective into the European South American markets.
Yeah, and certainly what we stand up in North America will be the manufacturing and export hub for the Northern Hemisphere. We'll keep the manufacturing here in Australia, covering our own local region, but it makes absolute sense to be certainly in the US where our major customer is, but also far more easier, far more efficient, far more effective to be exporting from the east coast of the US to Europe than to build it down here in Australia. So it's going to be the starters at large.
Yeah, and if it's okay, Darren, I wanted to mention in the one of the earlier slides, I think it's instructive to note that the $20 million ask has been $5 million of it or so has been stepped up by the current investors up to this point. So that's, I think, a good vote of confidence from your existing cap table, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a great shareholder base. We've got some of Australia's leading institutions also supporting us as well. But where we came from, this was founded on families and friends to start with, and we've grown, through our shareholder base over the past few years, and they have been extremely loyal to us, extremely supportive. They see the opportunity, they recognise the opportunity, right up to the institutional level. It's time, we've discussed as a board that, we'll continue to mature the business. And there was an opportunity to explore US investment to further support our US growth, and eventually a liquidity event, which will be US focused. Paul, do you want to expand on that?
No, that's a really good point. Arthur, thanks for raising it. I mean, the reason we're talking to you today is exactly as Darren described. The US gets what we do. It's obviously a far more developed market, and as investors get what we do, we see our long-term future in the US. Already, something like 80% of our revenues at this stage are coming from the US. So it makes absolute sense to be where our customer is and where our investor base needs to be as we go forward. Now, whether we look at some sort of listing further down the track, we're probably talking a year or two, probably 2 years before we do that, or an alliance or a trade sale, whatever it might be. Ultimately, there's going to be a liquidity event. And as time goes by, we don't see that being in Australia. It makes no sense, from a risk perspective from investors in Australia. And so, the interest for us is to bring on board several, depending on their investment interest level, partners in the US, just as we had them here in Australia, to really build that out and see what it can be in the short to medium term. We can talk to you about in a moment what we've looked to establish and where we're going to establish it and why we're doing that. But it does lend itself just beautifully to being a significant US defence supplier in the short to medium term. So this is really a pivot for our organisation. away from its roots, the family and friends here in Australia, with the support of our institutional investors here, to be big in the US, which is clearly where we need to be. Thanks, Darren.
Paul, do you want to continue to talk about this expansion strategy, what we're trying to do around the acquisition, etc.?
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's effectively that the prototype we've run here in Australia is we rather than building a factory from the ground up, we use a subcontractor to develop our hulls for us, and then we fit them out and deliver them. But we're adopting the same method in the US, where we'll be partnering with a subcontract hull manufacturer, an established provider to various parts of the defence forces. And on top of that, we'll then be acquiring and identified and with agreed heads of terms operation in Virginia Beach, near Virginia Beach, which has been supplying sustainment services to the United States Department of Defense, mainly the Navy, for the last 30 or 40 years, got a great reputation. They'll become effectively our fit out and our sustainment business in the United States. So this is really good from the point of view of our customers, and they can see that there's little risk in working with Visky in the US. Obviously, if you're a new supplier to say, hey, we're going to build a factory, trust us, a little bit risky, but they're comfortable with the acquisition target that we have agreed terms with, and they'll be very comfortable with our subcontractor supplier. The idea would be that for the first couple of years, with the initial batch of orders that Darren's highlighted, which could easily be 40 or 50 vessels a year, very, very quickly, that we'll work on that. And then over time, we'll then move to vertically integrate. And the site that we've identified, excuse me, as you'll see, it has 9 acres of waterfront land very close to Portsmouth. And we'll be developing that site to become that single-based, fully integrated, vertically integrated manufacturing and sustainment facility. And that will follow on once we've actually established our ability to deliver the vessels that we're identifying. We've agreed heads of terms with the founder of that organisation, and he'll be staying on for a period of time. And we've already road tested the reputation of that organisation with not just the DIU and the Marine Corps, but more widely. I'm very confident this is a very low risk, high probability of success way of actually servicing our future needs. The other thing as well that this brings us is by buying an established business, we're not standing up from scratch, whereby every dollar you spend is an investment dollar. This is already a profitable business. And so it allows us some flexibility in the timing of orders. We know when working with government, we don't write the pace of the orders, government does. And so if there is a delay of a month or 2 or 4 or 5 or 6 months between orders, or while we're developing new vessels, this facility continues to generate cash for us anyway, just like an established business. So we see that as a great way of, again, reducing our risk and entering the market very quickly. We could talk about this for a while, but I'll pause there and hand back to you, Darren.
Yeah, so Paul's spoken to, do you want to run through the financial overview as well?
Yeah, we're happy to bring Rob in there, because Rob's our finance guru, but you're essentially...
Yes, that's right.
Essentially, what we've put together, I will hand over to Rob, is our belief of where we stand for the next 2 years. In Australia, our financial years run to 30 June, so FY23 actual finished 30 June 2023. We're now midway through 24, and we certainly seem to be on target with the numbers that are there. But the point we are at the moment is the initial batch of orders that we have from the US, which is the Bravos and the Alphas that Darren's mentioned. They get us to round about break even. It's going to be the larger follow-on orders that makes profitability. The other lines that we have in there, particularly on the revenue, are established businesses here in Australia. We have over 12-month pipeline of orders. In fact, we're expanding here domestically as well. We've just won a significant order from the Australian Navy to develop landing craft vessels and obviously the marine safety vessels we have already. But Rob, do you want to sort of quickly run through the highlights here? Because I know this is a constantly moving feast, and this is our current belief on where we stand.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think the key line that we're looking at here is that USMC contract. As Paul Kennedy noted, we've really been almost selected by the Marine Corps to deliver these vessels. So we're extremely confident on that number, and it being a relatively a conservative number. And that's where we're focused in terms of the acquisition as well, because that's where we'll be delivering that up to $130 million out in FY26. The foreign military sales line is the other one I'd focus on. Again, we think that's pretty conservative. Darren's, as he's indicated, is heading over to the US. that'll be one of the key focuses while he's there, is getting us into the catalogue, getting us a number, which is essential for those who wish to place an order through that foreign military sales program. So that has the potential to grow exponentially. One of the things that Paul Billingham mentioned in the acquisition on that site that we should not forget is that it is very expandable. So it comes with a significant area of land. The manufacturing process itself, or the fit out that we'll be doing, is easily expandable without significant capital expenditure. So we do have the ability to grow that revenue number in line with the demand that we see coming from the Marine Corps for foreign military sales and other parts of the US DoD that Darren touched on. So again, confident on the numbers, really think the risk is on the upside though.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Arthur, I'm not sure if you've had any questions come in, but the cap raise overview here, like we said right from the start, we're seeking to raise up to $20 million here. We've already have $5.5 million raised to date from our existing shareholder base. We're looking to expand our shareholder base into the US to support that US growth trajectory and ultimately a US-based liquidity event over the fullness of time over the next two odd years. But this is primarily focused on the US growth and supporting US Department of Defense and foreign military sales opportunities that have been presented to us. Have you had any questions?
Yeah, some of them I've asked already, but I have one. People are familiar with the multiples in various businesses, but how does one establish the multiple on this type of business? And is it largely just a function of revenue now? How do you arrive at a valuation here?
Probably, I mean, George could probably jump on this as well, but effectively it's a discounted cash flow in terms of where we expect the rollout to go, Arthur. The challenge is improving, given the stage we are of the contracts. This is our belief. But George, do you want to jump into the valuation metric?
Yeah, look, I think the primary metric, as you mentioned, Paul, is the discounted cash flow. Arthur, if you look at the pipeline of opportunities that the business has, you can see that there's significant upside there. When we look at it and talk about it from a multiple perspective, certainly in FY24, revenue is growing significantly given the recent contract wins. From an EBITDA perspective, there's a slight loss, but when you start to consider it from an FY25 and financial year 26 period, that's when the multiple metrics can start to be used in conjunction with a broader DCF. And certainly, Paul and Darren mentioned a liquidity event a few minutes ago. It's a couple of years away, depending on how we progress over the next 2 years, that you'd start to look at valuation, exit pricing, and using the EBITDA that you can see there on the screen on an FY26 basis, being at that $32.6 million level.
Yeah, the gross profit margins, even though the EBITDA is what it is, seem significant. And, I didn't look at this closely or evaluate it, but the reason I asked the question, aside from the audience would be interested, is that the valuation seems to be on the low side based on the promising contracts that are in the offing. That's all.
Yeah. Look, it is, and our post-money valuation, I think, is 72, George. This is Australian dollars,
Yes.
and we're aware that a comparable multiple on a listed entity would be 10 times. The other point as well, you're seeing here our GP margin. We achieved 31.4% last year. We're on track to exceed 29% next year. We're actually being very conservative in the margins we're forecasting going forward. There's no hockey stick stuff in terms of margin. It's hockey stick stuff in terms of revenue because we're at that stage of our growth. But we believe that the significant production efficiencies, as Rob has explained, from being in Norfolk, in actually producing in America, we've achieved these gross margins by manufacturing vessels here in Australia and putting them on a boat. That is not efficient. We can make far more significant margin by developing on site and then shipping 2 miles up the road to our customer. So there's huge upside potential here, but we're very conservative in terms of our expectations for the organisation. And we've learned to be open and honest with our investors. They've been with us for 4 or 5 years now, some of them, and they're very tough institutions, and they won't take any nonsense. So we've learned to be conservative and sure that we can deliver what we say we're going to deliver.
Yeah, totally makes sense. George, do you want to say something?
No, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Everything Paul's just said, I agree.
Yeah, the other thing that, if I remember this correctly, Darren, from our last discussion, is that the construct of the contracts allows for pretty significant order upfront payment, which also helps cash flow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Paul Billingham alluded to that earlier. The Defence Innovation Unit has been extremely supportive through the contracting process, particularly with the financial arrangements associated with that contract. They recognise that we're not a organisation, we're not a prime organisation that can support millions of dollars worth of overheads at once, and capital commitment to our supplies. So there's some extremely favourable terms associated with that. We're looking at like up to 40% upfront payment, and then a milestone shortly after that we're looking at another 40%, and then it's very light touch at the back end of the contract.
Very much front loaded from a cash perspective.
Yeah,
I think it goes back, if I can, to one of the questions Arthur raised about competition. One of the things that we found with the DIU is they are working with us because they want this boat. So they're not testing it against this boat or another boat. Yeah. They want this boat, and they're doing whatever they can to ensure that they get this vessel. Yeah. And that means that the contract that we have, which is front-end loaded with cash, is the one that will flow into the major orders as well. So when you see what was 130 million in revenue coming in a couple of years' time off just from the Marine Corps, that is heavily front-end loaded with cash and designed by DIU to make sure they get this vessel.
Yeah, they want you to be an ongoing enterprise, right?
Well, I think also if you look at our use of funds slide, which we did jump over a little bit there, very little of the capital raise we're doing now is for working capital because of what Rob has just articulated. We have funding in place here in Australia from the Export Finance Authority, which is a government organisation that would help us. We actually don't need that money. We don't need the money to make the actual vessel. What we need is to do the development, the innovation, the establishment that Darren's articulated. So when we go back to the use of funds slide, which if we could just jump back up to that would be quite handy. There we go. So essentially, as you can see there, the most of the US, we're sort of roughly split at 50-50. The top part there, sort of halfway down the page, is our US acquisition. CapEx in the US acquisition, only 25% of that is actually to build up some of the key hires that we need, because we're buying an established business, is to add strength to it. The bottom half of that, the 6.3, most of what we've raised so far has been covered in that area. On top of that, we've got expansion capability domestically and so on and so forth. So working capital is not a problem for us because of the way that we're getting paid. Even in domestic manufacture of safety vessels, there's a substantial upfront payment. This is really about putting money on the table to grow the business in a capital way. It isn't just to fritter away on innovation or design or covering overheads. Yes, we're doing that already, but the business is strong enough already to cover that. This is about growth. Thanks.
Yeah, and at some point, it's better to get debt from instead of eating into your equity, right? But right now, you want that money in the form of equity so you can deploy it.
We're completely open, Arthur, in terms of the way that we do this. I mean, we have a need now, whether we fund that through debt, through some sort of hybrid, through some sort of warrant, or through equity. Look, we don't mind. We're very, very strong in the belief in where we're going. We have the track record to prove it. What Darren and the team have done is to deliver exactly what they said they're going to deliver over the last 2 or 3 years. Now, how we get to that next stage, we're ambivalent. We can see the numbers in 26 and beyond. So the pricing isn't such a huge issue for us. What is important is to get there quickly to settle on the deal that we've negotiated in Norfolk, and to put that out of the way and have the ability to expand, get into the foreign military sales and not be distracted.
Yeah, and having the presence in the US sends a loud message to the US government that you're committed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the customer can walk down and come into the factory and see what's happening with their vessels.
And I guess I haven't mentioned it throughout this presentation, but and Paul Kennedy can probably provide further comment on this, but past couple of years we've generated a lot of interest from some US-based primes, being Huntington Ingalls, continuing conversations with them around the unmanned surface vessel program. At the moment, they've reached out to us. We've had General Dynamics reach out to us as well. Lockheed Martin, etc. So there's a number of companies that have recognised what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the technology associated with everything that we're doing as well. And they're looking at to further collaborate, or to look at collaboration opportunities with the Whiskey Project Group as they pursue major programs within the US Department of Defence as well. Paul Kennedy, do you want to offer a comment associated with that, please?
Sure, Darren. So some of these companies that Darren has described are traditional maritime primes like Huntington Ingalls, but some are not. Some are providing data systems that would go on the internal guts of the boat. General Dynamics land systems. Why would they care about a boat? And so they've got a need to provide nodal sensors, meaning you'd have individual vehicles on land that have the ability to talk to potentially a boat, or it could talk to an airplane like an F-35. And so instead of in the past where we relied on satellites, you would have these nodes that can collect, target, and pass off to a shooter. And so everything that Darren has described with the Whiskey watercraft, whether they're manned or optionally manned, they would be able to talk to both an air platform or a ground platform to have sort of a total environmental awareness and the ability to hit anything that they see. And so that's what the prime's like, because there is really nobody else that's providing a waterborne variant. Everything else is either land or air. And so the Whiskey boat is the waterborne version that fits into that triad.
Super interesting. Wow.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Just wanted to highlight there that, it's not just the Whiskey Project Group transitioning to the US to grow and capitalise on these opportunities that are being presented to us. There's a lot more detail in the further Whiskey ecosystem that we're currently managing, with regards to other relationships, existing relationships in the US, and a number of those are associated with some of these prime entities as well.
Totally makes sense. Well, this has been even more interesting for me than the last time we did this, because I've learned a lot. And I super appreciate all the color that Paul Kennedy and Paul Billingham and others have been able to contribute here, and I'm sure the group does as well. With that, Darren, you want to wrap it up, as we've just hit against time, and then we'll make sure we put everybody in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. And once again, thanks everyone for your time and effort today. I know it's precious. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate talking to you about this unique opportunity, which is what it is. We're looking for support to the Whiskey Project Group to continue on our growth trajectory, particularly into the US, to be able to better support the US Department of Defence opportunities that we're currently delivering on and will continue to deliver on over the coming years. And at the end of the day, I'll just leave you with this note. At the end of the day, we exist to provide the warfighter with a competitive advantage. It's our brothers and sisters that are out there in harm's way every day, on the coalface, and that's why it's important to us to give back to the community and to provide them with a competitive advantage that they deserve, so that they can come home safely. But thanks, Arthur. Thanks for your team. We appreciate the opportunity today.
Schubert, thank you so much, everybody. And Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead. Do you want to say something?
Just saying thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I agree.
Just joining in. Yep.
Thanks for everybody on the whiskey team and the community for spending some time with us today. And as I always say, thank you for spending with us. The only thing you can't make more of, and that is your time. We'll make sure everybody gets in touch. And thank you. Till next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Arthur.